Hello and welcome to the Business of Authority. I'm Jonathan Stark,
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
and today we're going to talk about luck versus skill.
Yeah, because we didn't talk about it enough last week.
Yes, so this is a
Yeah.
continuation of our 300th episode with Annie Duke, where we talked about making better decisions and the role of luck and skill in outcomes and on and on and on. And we even did a lightning round at the end, but we still probably could have talked for another hour easily.
Yeah, she was great. I mean, talk about knowing when to quit.
Yes. So so one of the things that we both felt could have been explored more is this kind of luck versus skill thing. And I love the story she tells in probably all of her books about people kind of over the cognitive bias to blame bad luck when things go wrong, but to take credit when things go right, as if you had some control over it. So it's like people will quickly point to bad luck, and it seems true in my experience. Like they don't point to good luck as often as they point to bad luck as the cause of an outcome. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead. I heard the intake.
Yeah, I know. I was sitting there going, do I want to go into a story now? I think I want to let you frame this, but I do have a story about that. Because we all do that, and I know I do. There are moments where I just think, oh, well, that was a baller move. Of course it. And then if you really sit and think about it, it was purely luck in terms of timing or something else. So yeah, I think it's important, especially when we can look backwards, to really think about, what could we have done differently? And there's not much you can do about luck, but there are things we can do that are related to skill.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I always point to in my past that was a lot of good luck was when the basically point in time when I published my iPhone book couldn't have been better. And it was completely by accident. I ran into a guy from O'Reilly at a party and pitched a book to him, which he took to the editors, and they said, no, but do you have something else? And I said, I've got an idea for an iPhone book. And like, it came out at perfect time. It was total luck. It was a good book, but it wasn't like earth shattering, but the timing was just fantastic. And I mean, it couldn't have been luckier. It was like running into someone at a party from a big publisher. It was random.
And see, somebody else would say, well, yeah, but you went to the party, which shows that you were working really hard because you had this book idea that you were just, yeah. That's my point. I mean,
Right.
These are the stories we tell ourselves.
Right. Yeah, I was networking my face off, and subconsciously I was going to pitch this second book idea.
Yeah, right,
Silly.
because that was really your plan all along.
Yeah.
That first one was just a throwaway.
Right. Who knows what would have happened if I'd got the first one published? It was much more evergreen. But anyway, so let's talk about it. So do we want to jump right into ways to identify luck versus skill, or for making decisions, or retroactively? How do you calibrate your meter, and why bother?
Yeah, I'm wanting to tell a story. I'm wondering if we can use this as an example. See what you think.
Okay.
So my real estate business, right? So the idea was to find a property that needed some love, not lots and lots of love, but some love that was underappreciated. Bring it back to life, rent it out, and slowly wait for it to double in value, right? So we bought the property in 2019. You all know what happened in 2020 with the pandemic, and all of a sudden real estate prices went crazy. So it would be really easy for me to sit back and go, oh, well, it was total skill. I bought exactly the right house. And at the time, I was patting myself on the back. I mean, I think I got a really good deal. But the truth is, because the market moved outside of any control that we had, I probably could have bought another one and been as successful, maybe even more successful. Right? So there was a huge element of luck. And I always chuckle when I hear like the real estate crowd talking about how many doors they have and, all this stuff, but they never talk about the thing that's really important. Like, well, are you cash flowing?
Right.
Like, are you getting money from this? How's this working? So yeah, it's like, I feel like it would be so easy And a lot of people did actually when we sold it. They're like, "Oh man, you were so smart. You did that." I'm like, "No, I wasn't." I mean, yeah, I mean, I acted when somebody else might not have, but somebody else who acted similarly would have been rewarded in pretty much the same way. There wasn't anything special about us, which sort of bugs me because I like to be special. But a lot of it was luck.
It reminds me of my first house where I could point to bad luck because I got killed on my first house. And I could point to bad luck if I wanted to, if I wanted to hide from the fact that I made a series of horrible decisions when I went to sell the place, when I went to put it on the market. And yeah, it was just like, it was not bad luck. I mean, the prices were down. We were, when we sold it, when we put it on the market, prices were down. But we really had strong reason to move. It was like this, and I could blame bad luck. Oh, the market was down. What could I have possibly done? Of course I took a loss, but no, I made a bunch of dopey decisions. I contradicted or I refused to accept the advice from the realtor, who obviously is more of an expert than me. I mean, it was my first house. I had never sold one. So it was just silly. And I paid the price. And I take full credit for, I mean, that was my fault. It was not bad luck. But it sure would be nice to point to bad luck and be like, oh yeah, that whatever it was, 40 or 80 grand I lost, depending on how you count it. It stinks. Yeah, it stinks.
Yeah, good lesson. But not fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So,
good lesson at the end, but who wants to learn that one the hard way?
Right. It's hard for us. I know I've talked to this with my wife repeatedly. It's hard to imagine selling the house that we're in right now, like ever. But if I were to do it again, I would have learned my lesson. And maybe this is a segue into what you can do about luck. I mean, especially the bad kind, in terms of mitigation and preparation and those sorts of things. So like the nice part about acknowledging that not everything's under your control or a skill-based outcome is that it allows you to imagine worst case scenarios and like, okay, like what are the odds of this happening? What, it's called guesswork, but it's like, what do I think the odds of this happening are, and what would be the impact if it did? And come up with, a lot of times, it's been my experience when I think like this, that a lot of times you can tweak your decision in a way that's not meaningful in terms of your outcomes, that really does make the effect of bad luck a lot lower.
Yeah, that's why I liked Annie's concept of pre-mortems, right? Where you're thinking before you do something, like what are all the things that could go right and wrong? But although the way she positioned it in the book is that it's a way to get, like when you're working with a team, it's a way to get the non-optimistic voices a chance to be heard. And that way, even the people who like the direction the least are more apt to go all in, right? Because they've been heard and their concerns have been considered in terms of how the project, let's call it a project, how the project moves forward. But I think when it's just us as soloists, or maybe with in concert with our advisors, I mean, it's really helpful to sit there and say, okay, so what happens if I put all my eggs in this basket and the economy crashes?
Right.
Or if you're a bankruptcy lawyer, the economy does great, right? It's like, what are those things that can impact you? And it's not to get you to this point of being so frozen with fear that you don't make a move. But I do think we tend to be optimistic when it comes to business moves.
Yeah, as a group, I would say it's something, roughly guessing, it's something like 85% of the people I talk to that are solopreneurs or soloists they fall in the optimistic camp. And a smaller percentage falls in the pessimistic camp. And protecting yourself against over-optimism, I think it came up a lot with Annie. It came up a little bit in the episode, but it comes up a lot in her work, of sort of recalibrating your optimism so that it's just a little bit more pragmatic and realistic and makes you more resilient. Because she would probably say, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Because it's like, you want to be able to come back every day and keep playing. It's like, fold that hand. Like, you got dealt two bad cards, just fold the hand and wait for better cards, right? Like that's huge. I think that concept right there, waiting for better cards, is huge.
And it's so hard, right? Because I'm not even talking about poker, because I mean that's, you've got, you know, the thrill of the chase and the lights and the action and all of that. But just in anything, like you've designed this thing, it's your baby, and nobody thinks it's beautiful. It's not working. Stop.
Yeah.
Try something else.
Right.
But yeah, it's so hard. We hold on with both hands really, really tight.
Yeah, I've got a great idea. It's like, do you? Prove it to me, you know, like, so it's like, there's an interview, I've never been able to find it, but I think it's from the Walter Isaacson book, where Steve Jobs was interviewed after, I think it was after the iPhone, might have been after the iPod, but I think it was after the iPhone. I can't remember. It was like, they had a huge success with one of their products. And, you know, they were like, what are you going to do next? And his answer was, I'm going to wait for the next big thing. Right. So it's like, which totally defines their style, Apple's style, at least in that era, where they would just jump on the bandwagon of something right when it was like needed to be perfected, it was ready for prime time, and then they would like nail it. So but the reason that you made me think of it is because of the patience aspect. You know, he's waiting for better cards, basically.
Yeah. And I just, as humans, we're not really good at being patient. And that's sometimes where it's really helpful just to get somebody else's input, you know, somebody who kind of understands your field or your expertise, but isn't in it, you know, the same way that you are.
Sure.
There's that whole sunk cost piece. And the point that she made, and we've talked about it a few times, is that if that decision is tied to your identity, it makes it even harder.
Right.
To quit.
Right. So yeah, so we were talking before the show a little bit about a couple of things in this area. And one is that a big theme in her quit book, in fact, quite a bit of it is taken up with the shame aspects of quitting. And, you know, I was making the joke earlier that, like, unless you're flinging yourself into a volcano, you're not really quitting, you're pivoting. So you're moving from whatever you're doing now to something that would be you know, you're folding that hand and you're going to get new cards in 3 minutes, you know, or whatever it is in poker.
Right.
So if you don't think of it as quitting, you think of it as pivoting. Maybe it's a big pivot, but if you think of it like that, I think it takes some of the sting out of it. A great example is Stuart Butterfield folding Glitch, giving the money back to investors, and creating Slack. It was like,
I love that
right?
story.
Good move.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he saw better cards. He's like, oh, there's better cards over there. That line at the grocery store is going a lot faster. I'm going to jump over there.
And he didn't see Slack when he made that decision. That's what I thought made it even more powerful. Is like, I'm looking forward all of these steps, and I can't see any way that this is a good outcome. So we need to fold now. And it's kind of the opposite of what you expect in the startup space.
Yeah, right. So the other thing is about the identity thing. That is hard. That is definitely hard. I've wrestled with that one, where it's like, you know, I actually made a list in preparation for the interview with Annie of like, what are the identities that I'm most loath to give up? You know what I mean? Like over the course of my very long life, what were the things that I would introduce myself as? I'm a musician, I'm a guitarist, I'm a black belt, I'm a entrepreneur, whatever the things are. I'm a web developer. What were the ones that were the hardest to let go of? And
what was the hardest one?
Well, the ones I haven't let go of. Musician's probably the hardest. Like, I have to admit to myself, I am not a musician anymore. I'm just not. And it's just not fair for me to say that. It's not a daily practice. It's not a weekly practice. It's not a monthly practice. If I touched my guitar once in a year, that's surprising. I'm just not a musician. I'm a, recovering musician perhaps, but that one was brutal. That one was brutal because for years, decades, I went to college for music.
Yeah.
Spent tons of money, right? And absolutely loved it for certain reasons, but then at a certain point was just so, it just made me angry all the time for a variety of reasons. So it's like, this isn't good. I'm going to go do computers. Computers is making me happy all the time. So I just switched back to computers and then, and then stayed on that track for a long, long time. Yeah, that one was rough though.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because going back to the real estate example, I got into this idea that I'm a real estate investor Like I really got into that. Like, and there's a whole thing, like I can join a club. Whereas with a lot of my day-to-day work, there's not a lot of clubs to join, right? And so it was kind of cool. And so when I let that label go, I wouldn't say it was painful, but it wasn't easy. Like I really had to think about it because there's just something, and I'm sure it's tied to, my identity as an entrepreneur. Like that, I'm not letting that go. Like I can't not look at something and go, oh, you could make a business out of that.
Yeah.
This is what you could do to make a business out of that. So I think that was the challenge, but it was a very short-lived, career,
Right.
a very short-lived identity, like 4 years out of my entire life. So
Right.
yeah, it is that some of those things are really hard to let go. But I think to your earlier point, like most of the people that are listening here, you're not necessarily standing on the edge of a precipice deciding like, are you going to jump or not? It's, what do I want to make a change? Do I want to let maybe this one little thing go and try for something else? Or, do I want to let something that has been a hefty percentage of my revenue, but that isn't speaking to me anymore? Am I ready to take the risk that goes with dropping that? I mean,
Right.
we've had that conversation in my Slack group recently where someone was really knew that they needed to let go of a client, a longtime client, that it was time, but it was such easy money. It's like, oh, I just don't have to worry. It's just nice having that come in and not worry about it. But they'd reached the point where, they knew it was time and they made the move, right? And of course, instantly after you do something like that, you tend to feel lighter. Yeah, a lot lighter.
Yeah. Because you know.
Yeah.
You've
and
known.
we take a long time to make those kinds of decisions. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, I think it's a good thing to think through what the implications are of decisions. I don't think either one of us is saying go out and be impulsive and just quit things because you're tired of them in that moment. But yeah, it can feel really good when you quit the right thing.
But let's get back to luck versus skill.
Yeah.
So why bother calibrating for that? Who cares, right? Like, who cares if it was luck or skill? What's your reaction to that?
Well, yeah, I'm actually thinking. I guess I care because I want to know if I'm getting better at something. Like, am I getting better? Am I the same or am I worse? Because I could make a move that feels like the exact right move, but my timing is bad. That's the luck piece. Like I have an idea and this has happened to me. I had an idea that's ahead of its time.
Oh, yeah.
And it didn't work for me.
Right.
So, yeah. So it kind of, I to this day don't think it was skill. I think, or lack of skill in this case, I think it was bad timing. And maybe I could have figured out a way to make it work, but I didn't want to because I wanted it to work the way I wanted it to work.
Yeah.
So maybe that is a lack of skill, but it was a vision. It was a way that I wanted to do that. So yeah, I think from a skill standpoint, it's like, it's going to sound kind of silly maybe, but I really don't want to pat myself on the back for making a genius move when I just got lucky, because I'm not going to learn from that. And the next time I'm in a similar kind of a situation and I'm thinking, oh, this is all about me and my skill set. And then I get, bam, the fickle finger of fate hits me upside the head. And I'm like, but it worked before.
Yeah.
Why didn't it work now? So I think it's about learning and getting smarter for the next thing.
Right.
I mean, what do you think?
That second half there is exactly what I think. It scares me to not have any sense of what was lucky and what wasn't, because you're automatically, if you don't think about that, you're automatically it's gonna accrue to skill in your head, and like, you can do no wrong or whatever. Golden boy, boom, just like making unicorns left and right, and then it just turns out like the market was hot. Right. So
Yeah.
that, and I know I'm in the category of over optimist. I'm fairly pragmatic, but I am a recovering optimist, I would say. I know that I am overly optimistic about, for example, like I was laughing to myself when you were talking about idea before it's time. Like a bunch of times I've made predictions or made bets on a particular technology that, oh, it's going to be here next year. Like mobile payments can be here next year. It's 2012. It couldn't possibly take longer than 2012. And then when they replace all the credit card machines, I'm like, this is it. This is the moment for mobile payments. Didn't happen until COVID, and it's still not that common. And I just like it'll eventually be here, but I'm like, I just got out of the prediction game a long time ago because I'm just way over optimistic about how quickly society's going to adopt things. And and I was always in this filter bubble at the time. I was in this filter bubble of early adopters, like real bleeding edge people.
Yeah.
So we're all looking around like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Like, of course this is going to catch on. A decade later, nope, just still slow and steady.
Yeah.
So for me, to the extent that history predicts the future, it's like if I would look back at how I did something that worked, I want to know which pieces actually worked, like which pieces I had control over and which pieces I didn't. So like the book, for example, the iPhone book example, I think I did a pretty good job of writing that book. I had good editors. I really researched the information. It was all brand new tech, so there was no competition really. But that was just table stakes, honestly. It was all the timing. Like I have no illusions about that. Like so that I think that's good, So like if since I know that, if I look forward, then it's like, okay, what are the things I can control, and what can I do to counteract any bad luck that comes of that? Which for a book doesn't seem like that big a deal. I mean, worst case scenario, it just doesn't sell that well. But if I switch to a different thing that maybe I took too much credit for, I definitely took too much credit for at the time, was when my consulting business was really benefiting from that book maybe 3 years later. And I was just getting phone calls all the time. I mean, it was a common,
awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And I was like, oh, this is the way it's going to be from now on. I just like nailed it. I'm set for life. I didn't think those thoughts consciously, but that's how I behaved, as if I were set for life. And I don't like speaking to these conferences anymore. It's kind of annoying. I'm going to stop doing that. I'm like, I got this book deal, but I don't really want to write it, and it's kind of a rehash. I'm just going to cancel this book deal. And then all this, 2 years after that, it's like, crickets, hello.
Yep.
Where's my money? Where's my income?
Stop putting gas in the machine.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember if I thought about it at the time, about how lucky the timing of the iPhone book was. I think I did know that. I think I was aware of the fact that my timing was just like superhuman. Or I shouldn't put it like that. It was just lucky. But I didn't account for that in terms of business. So I didn't make a whole bunch of risk mitigation. There's so many things I could have done to prevent the ultimate stall of leads. And so my leads stopped coming in. I still had long-term retainer clients. So it wasn't like my income tanked overnight or anything, but I was just like, wow, I haven't gotten a lead in like 6 months. That's not normal. I just wasn't paying attention to it. And I don't know if I think it's not, well, I guess in retrospect, it's so predictable, but at the time, I don't think it was predictable. Like it felt like mobile was never going to stop ascending. It was never going to hit the top and turn into an S curve. And of course that happened. I'm trying to find in this story, I'm trying to find a bad luck, because this is lack of skill, lack of awareness. But I suppose it's because I was over indexing on, like, I wasn't paying attention to really how lucky I was timing wise.
Well, I mean, if that were today, you would have systems in place that would say, "Oh, my revenue is down from the last quarter. My leads are down. My email subscribers are down." Yeah. I mean, you would see some signs.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
And I guess that's skill. I mean, it's having an early warning system, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing that I wasn't, it's hard to call this luck because it was such a long-term thing, but the thing that I was blind to was that the Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, normal distribution curve with the gap, the chasm. Mm-hmm. I burned through the early adopters, and then that was it. Like by the time we got to like the middle market, that's when things started to slow down. Yeah. I guess it feels like it was too long term for luck. It wasn't like a single decision. It was a million little decisions that were, I guess if I could pull luck into this at all, it would be that I was overconfident because I was under appreciating how lucky the timing really was,
Yeah.
and just acting as if, that I'd just be making hay forever.
Well, yeah. I mean, and that's a very human emotion, right? It's like, oh, I cracked the code. I know how to do this now. Oh, okay.
I
I can
made
just
it.
like sail into the sunset. Yeah, exactly. I made it. And what we don't realize, which has really always been true, is when we make it, we don't make it forever. Just like when our luck is down, it doesn't have to be down forever. Things change. And that's the challenge. And I think the people that have the hardest time, I'm thinking of somebody I used to know who had a really super successful real estate business, like really successful. And he was so fond of saying, I'm a self-made man. The thing is, he married a woman who came from a family with a fair amount of money, and his father-in-law lent him all the money for his first deal. So, like, good for him, but like, how does that make you self-made? Like, don't you want to give credit to some other people? So when somebody feels that way, they overemphasize their own brilliance, right? And how they get ahead, and they underestimate the help that they get from others. And I think when that happens, we act differently. And I think when we have a challenging set of circumstances, there's not always a circle of people around to help you to the next spot.
Sure. Yeah. We haven't, there's the whole like being born on third base kind of luck that you have, it just happened. It's historical fact. Like wherever you were born, however you were born, it's all true. So I feel like I want to zoom into people making business decisions that are a little bit less long term, because that was the thing about the poker hands, and we brought this up with Annie. It was like, well, it's important to have a really tight feedback loop. And I was like, what if you make a bet that has a really long feedback loop? And she said, there's no such thing. Like, there's always some kind of leading indicators that would give you a sense of like how the bet is going. And the thing that comes up for me with coaching is that there's this the risky, air quotes, risky decision a lot of times is around positioning. It could be around creating a new product, like a course or something that's going to take a non-trivial amount of effort to create, but and sometimes it's around quitting something like firing a client, or giving up a particular product line, or not doing consulting, not doing one-on-one consulting anymore, and I want to switch to product, or something like that, where it's still in the future. So I feel like a lot of the conversation is we're looking backwards, but if you look forward and you don't yet have the postmortem or benefit of hindsight, it comes back to like something we've talked about over and over, which is making small bets, like bets that you can recover from, so that you can get more data. Like you're never going to have perfect data. And I hear this all the time with someone who's like hesitant to niche at all. Like it's not even like it's not even like they're not sure about this particular one. They'll say like, well, I don't want to spend 6 months. I don't want to waste all this time to find out that this was a bad choice. And it's like, well, I don't know what other, like, so just don't spend 40 hours a week over the course of 6 months. Do small things. And and I think you even said like 6 months is too long. Like you'd be able to tell quicker than that if you're going to get traction in a space, or if you're just, barking up the wrong tree.
Well, she talked about kill criteria, but it's also sort of just your own criteria for success. And if you say, oh, I'm going to do this positioning, and in 1 month, I'm going to see all of the results that I want, that's not realistic. But you could say, here are the kinds of things I think I could see in a month, in 2 months, in 3 months. And I mean, so there are ways to sort of, drop the breadcrumbs.
Right. So let's talk for a second about luck in that space. So if you were, I just had a coaching call yesterday with someone who, he's like, I know I need to get more specific. I know he was a total generalist. I know I need to niche down on something. I'm not sure, it's a classic. It's like, I want to niche down, but how do I pick the right target market? How do I pick the right one? I'm like, well, I don't know. There's a right one. There's like ones that are going to work and ones that aren't going to work. So which ones are the easiest for you to get access to, whose values don't conflict with yours? So like who would you like to work with that you already have access to? And so we explored that. And what I wanted him to do was just make small bets and look for feedback that was positive. So like, what are the leading indicators that a positioning statement or a niche market or whatever level of definition that you have, if you send out this signal, just do like a listening tour or play the introduction game or whatever, little things that take almost no time. And people are like, oh yeah, I would, and they want to spend something. They either want to take my money, I'll do this right now, or, oh, I know I have to introduce you. I got to introduce you to Bob. So they're risking their reputation. So they're risking either money, reputation, or time. If they're like, oh, this is amazing. I know we only set up a 15-minute call, but we need to book like a 2-hour brainstorming session. I really want to hash this out with you. So if you find someone that's willing to risk time, money, or reputation, and on a brand new positioning statement or some offer, some kind of like marketing material, that's a really good sign.
Yeah.
The other thing that can happen, and this is where luck comes in, is they introduce you to someone who's like a super connector or like the head of an association or an online community, and they want you to come in and speak about this thing. And that is, I've often in the past talked about increasing your luck surface area. Like you can't control it, but you can do things to increase the surface area of the possibility of good luck happening. So like fertile ground for good luck. And one of those things is networking with a very clear positioning statement. I guess that's two things. But if you have a very clear positioning and you're actively meeting new people online or in person, you're creating a really big luck surface area because people love matchmaking. They love introducing people for win-win types of things. And you sort of set yourself up for serendipity. So
Yes.
yeah, so that was a long way to say, I think you can have a positive influence on your good luck.
Well, and I think the other thing is that the point of all of this is that you can do these small bets. Like doing either of those things can give you really quick traction. Like I think about doing the listening tour, the first one that I did, incredible traction. Introducing a podcast with the name Soloist Women has meant people have introduced me to to other women who they think should be on the podcast or that I should know. And it's and you just watch it and it multiplies. And so, but it's an easy way to tell, because if nobody's interested, if you're not getting any hits, and by hits, I mean kind of like a dopamine hit, right? Like somebody goes, oh, I heard you're doing this. Or, to your point, they do an introduction. If you're not getting those hits, it's probably not going to happen unless you like really stick with it for a reason that is way bigger than your business, like a revolution that you want to make and you're not so worried about how quickly it catches on or how much money you make in the short run.
Right. Really long game. And yeah, and you just have to be very small bets if you're gonna keep coming back and playing that game. It has to be like safe enough that no one investment is going to wipe you out.
Yeah, you're not putting all your money on red.
Yeah, red 26.
Although at least that's if it was just red, at least that's a 50% chance. But
that's the only thing I've ever put money on in Vegas. Was I think it was the first time I went to Vegas. I was like, oh, I'm going to bet on this. And I was like standing next to a roulette wheel and I put down $20 and I lost. And I'm like, that was the stupidest thing I ever did. And I was just like, I guess I'm not a gambler.
Yeah, well, there's, there are games where there's skill, like poker. There's some skill. There's still luck. And then there's, the slot machine, which is all luck.
Yeah, not interested.
And yeah, the odds are stacked against the one pulling the lever or pressing the button.
These days,
yeah, it's pressing buttons now.
Probably just wave your hand now. Blink and it will. Yeah. So, all right. So when do we deploy this mental energy because you probably make 10,000, 100,000 decisions a day. You're not going to deploy this sort of like metacognition around this decision I'm about to make. What are the odds? Like, how much of this can I control skill wise, and what are the luck components, and how do I mitigate those things? So how do you know when you should take the time to really explore these decisions, like just from your personal experience?
Well, I mean, I think that there's at least two and probably three things that I would look at, and it's how much time is this going to take me? Is this a significant time investment? And it might also be like the depth of cognitive work, not just how much time, but like how deep is it? There's money. How much money is this going to cost me? And something, I don't know, I just jotted down reputation. I'm not even sure that's the right word, but it's like, what does this do to how my business is perceived? So it's positioning, but not.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So I mean, like those are the big three that I would think about. So if it's, if I'm just deciding, do we invite a guest or do we just talk? Like that's a low stakes decision, right? That's easy. If it's, am I going to spend the time and energy to write a book, and how much time? Like that, I would really think through on all three fronts: time, money if I'm self-publishing, or money if I'm giving up revenue in order to create the time to write,
right.
And then the reputation piece. So what's the investment? Is this going to help my reputation? Is it going to hurt it?
Yes, right. So like you've already mentioned the podcast, the new podcast, that felt like something you really explored.
I did.
Before you placed the bet, before you decided.
Yeah, I did. And it's funny because I always chuckle because, your line is, if you can record a Zoom call, you can do a podcast.
Yeah.
And I think that's true in terms of like the mechanics of it. But for me, doing another podcast, because I don't think of myself as like an instinctive podcaster. I'm not the person who's going to have like 5 podcasts. But for me, it was an investment in time, and not just like the thinking about it, but it was am I willing to commit the amount of time that it takes to do an interview-based show?
Right.
Because that's doing research, it's reading their books, and am I willing to spend the money to have other people do things for me? And that was, the money isn't like, it's not a lot of money, but it's enough to say, oh, I should think about this.
Right.
But probably the biggest piece was that reputational piece. Like, is this something that people want to hear from me? Is this a podcast that only I could do? Because that's a thing I kind of like when talking to people about, should they podcast or should they not? It's like, well, what do you want your podcast to be about? And is it something that really only you could do? And so I spent a lot of time like going through those 3 things, and and the fear factor about, like it's easy because I have you as a partner. So I can just say, oh yeah, it's Jonathan's fault if it didn't work. It's so much easier when you have a partner, right? You can tell yourself that, oh yeah, that was Jonathan. That wasn't me. That wasn't luck. That was Jonathan.
You can throw me under the bus.
Yeah. When it's just you, it's, there's no place to point any fingers. So yeah, I did. For me, it was a consequential decision, I guess is what I would say. Not momentous, but consequential.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to think of. Here's a funny insight. Or maybe it's not an insight, but I'm like trying to think of the last time I did that, and nothing's jumping out at me, which makes me think I'm not placing enough bets, which is consistent with my past behavior as well. So it's like,
oh, interesting.
Yeah, right. So like, it's not a skill versus luck thing so much, but if I was, let's think. I've got a bunch of things in the hopper. So like, I haven't launched. I've got this new thing. I don't want to. I feel like I'm promoting it, but I've got this new thing that is not poor. It's just hazy. It's kind of hazy. It's one of the. Just think of like any kind of prototype. Like it's an idea for an engagement, not a product, but like productized service. And it's a little bit hazy. I got some feedback. Feedback felt right, tested a little bit, didn't work, but it was very small test, and got feedback that let's just call the feedback confusion.
Oh,
So I'm like, okay, it's not clear. Somehow it's
Okay.
not clear. I thought it was clear. It's not clear.
It's actually helpful.
Oh, that's super helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's the takeaway there? I thought I knew more from the little bit of research I did. I wouldn't say I went on a listening tour, but I did a little bit of research with like key people. And from that, I thought I had a clear picture. And then when I shared that with a small group of people, I got nothing but confusion back. Lots of questions and like comparing it to the wrong things. And it's like, wow, I did a really bad job on that sales page. And what is the takeaway here though? I'm like, it's funny because I'm struggling to find any kind of luck in any of this. What would be a decision where I would be really dependent on luck?
Well, I guess if you announce a new program and it's not confusion, they understand exactly what it is. And let's assume the price. No, I don't think I'm going to the right place.
Yeah, it's not luck.
That winds up being a skill.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of something where I mean the economy. Like there's these sort of macro forces that affect people. You know, like you don't want to be in the VC space right now.
Well, actually, this startup space is exactly what I was thinking of earlier because I've got a number of clients and contacts that are in that space, and it's been a horrid year for most of them. Really, really challenging year. So that's a luck thing.
That is definitely a luck thing. Yes.
And the challenge is, and I've had this conversation with one client in particular. The challenge is like, okay, is it luck, i.e., what's happening in the space, or am I doing something wrong?
Right.
Is there, or another way to say that I prefer is there something I could do differently that would improve my luck in this bad luck situation?
Right.
Right. But yeah, and it can be hard for people to realize that they are in this case, victim of luck. But at the same time, we're so not wired to just sit there and go, well, I guess I just wasn't lucky this year and do nothing.
Right.
Like who does that? No, we're searching for like tweaks. Like, can we do this? Or sometimes overhauls. But when luck is bad, overhaul isn't always the right answer. But during the pandemic, it was for a lot of people.
Yeah. I think this was in Ditcherville where I read this thread where, it was same kind of conversation. And one of the people had a friend, I'm probably butchering this, apologies, but the basic gist of it was they had a friend who was like a lawyer who helped people go public, helped startups go public, IPO. And over the past year has basically been doing taxes because it's just not happening. Like no one's going public. So it's like, is that fun for that person? Guaranteed not. But there's this, but to completely overhaul their business when clearly there was like an asteroid level event in the startup space with SVB and interest rates and all of that. It's like, is it time to hang it up, or do you want to just wait for a better deal? Like a better
you wait it out.
Better cards, right? Like it seems pretty clear to wait that out if you still want to do it. I mean, you have to assume the person still wants to do it. But yeah, I think that can make a lot of sense to kind of just like hibernate, right? And like make sure you've got some kind of cash flow for the time being, and then just wait for it to come back. It seems like it.
Well, and the hibernate could be not hibernation necessarily, but where you work on a thing you've always wanted to have the time to do, like writing a book or developing a program or, something, or maybe just not related to your business. Maybe there's something in the community you wanted to do or a cause you really care about.
Right.
And that's why, having money in the bank is a really good thing when these things happen.
Sure. And I mean, I have a lot of the developers in my audience. This is probably the first year where I would hesitate to say this, but they could all get a job tomorrow. Like pretty much. They might not like the job and it might not pay great, but They probably could. This year might be a little bit different because there's a huge glut in the market of unemployed software developers.
Right.
But it certainly has been true. But it's not the kind of thing you want. You know, you'd never want to like go back in house. Like I'm unemployable at this point, and I can barely code anymore anyway. So I guess it doesn't apply to me. But for folks who are sort of solo business owners and have that skill set, the hibernate could just be I'm gonna take one for the team and get a salary so I can continue to pay my mortgage while I regroup, or just wait for the pendulum to swing back, or write that book, or whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of decision when you can point to a pretty clear, this is helpful, right? Because if you can point to a pretty clear bad luck event, and it's not that you were doing something wrong, you just got perfect stormed. So
Yeah, and I think it helps with with your ego and with being able to pick yourself up and dust yourself off to do the next thing. Mm-hmm. It's like when the crash of 2008 impacted a lot of people, and a lot of people started, they became reluctant business owners or reluctant consultants because their job was gone, their cushy job was gone, so they had to reinvent themselves. Mm-hmm. And it happens to all of us in different ways. So I think when you can really understand that, it's not me, it's them.
Right.
Right. It does help. It really does.
Yeah. It's like this is verbatim anything. I don't think she said it on the show, but you can look back. If you can look back and say like, okay, did I make a bad decision or did I make a good decision that had a bad outcome? I know we talked about this a little bit, but she's got that football story that's so great. And that retrospective, if I was working with someone, if I was coaching someone and they were like, all right, here's the decision I made, I would make the same decision again today, but I just got nailed by this, I got sideswiped. So just deciding what to do moving forward, that would affect my advice, right? So like they
yes,
right,
agreed.
Like they might not want to hunker down and hibernate and get some cash flow and just wait for it to come back. They might not want to do that, but that would be an option on the table, in my opinion. They might want to say like, well, what can I do different? What can I do to respond in the current marketplace? Because maybe it won't come back, or maybe I want something that's a little bit more anti-fragile, to use Nassim's term. What if this is the inspiration for a pivot or a new product line or something like that? That's fine too. But if it was different and someone couldn't point to any bad luck, and they were just, like me, when I just like stopped doing any marketing activities in my consulting business, and I was like, geez, I haven't gotten any leads in a while, right? That was lack of skill, or at least awareness. So if someone had been coaching me, I would like to think that they would be like, well, do you want to keep doing this as a job? What do you think the odds that mobile is going to continue to be this kind of like top of the hype cycle in demand skill? And talk me through that. And I would say it's probably going down. It's going down. I would have said that at the time. Like that expertise is now built into platforms. Like you don't need me to come in and tell you how to do it. It's built into WordPress and SAP and so on and so forth. So they'd be, if I had a coach back then, it probably would have been good advice to say, maybe it's time for a pivot.
Well, yeah, because there's a sort of a life cycle that you were seeing. You weren't translating it into action yet.
Right. There was no bad luck. The good luck ran out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, everything has a season, right? It kind of is like that. There is this, I swear I have to look this up, but there's a theory, it has a name, has an author. And if you imagine like the normal distribution curve where you go up, 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 and then you go down, the idea is when you want to make a change before you hit the peak. Because once you hit the peak, it takes more energy to increase because you're on the downslope. And the example that I think they used in the book was Jell-O. Like remember, like Jell-O was like not a thing, and then they figured out how to remarket it, and all of a sudden it's crazy good again, and then it goes down, and then they figure out a new way and it goes up. It's so much easier. And energetically, it's easier to do it before the curve starts to go down. Psychologically, it's really hard when it still goes up. Like the Slack inventor, right? I mean, he was they were all on this upward trajectory. So to make a decision to shift when things are really good in that moment is exceedingly difficult. And most of us don't do it. We wait until the curve goes down.
Yeah,
and then
forced.
We start pivoting. Yeah, and it's harder. It's harder. It's much easier when we're making the decision because it's what we want to do, or we are very good at future forwarding, and we can see a future that isn't what we want, so we pivot now instead of waiting till later.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking at the clock on the wall. I think we should wrap up. I don't know if we helped. But maybe some of these stories are just having the conversation. Maybe it'll start a conversation with people around like attributing success, good or bad outcomes to luck or skill, and like how that influences your future decision making. That was the hope for this episode.
I know. I'm not sure we achieved it, but I think I think of it this way. If you do nothing else after listening to this episode, what might be interesting is to look backwards at something that you considered either a raging success or a raging failure, and really just chart it out for 5 minutes, like what was luck and what was skill. And it might help you to rethink for the future.
Cool. All right, folks, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark.
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
And we hope you join us again next time for The Business of Authority. Bye.
Bye-bye.